Ryan Mercer stood in the doorway of his daughter's bedroom, watching Sophie sleep, his phone vibrating with another unanswered call from Elena. 3 weeks ago, he'd introduced them. 2 weeks ago, Sophie had started calling her by name instead of Dad's friend. 1 week ago, he'd seen his daughter laugh harder than she had in years. And tonight, he was about to destroy it all. Not because Elena had done anything wrong, but because he was terrified of what would happen when she inevitably left. What Ryan didn't know was that across town, Elena was making a decision that would change everything. If you're watching from anywhere in the world, drop your city in the comments below. I want to see how far this story travels. And if you're curious whether Ryan makes the biggest mistake of his life or finds the courage to fight for what matters, stay until the end. Hit that like button, and let's dive into this journey together. The fluorescent lights of Martinez Auto Repair flickered as Ryan Mercer slid out from beneath a 2015 Honda Accord. His hands black with grease, his lower back reminding him that 32 wasn't the same as 22. The wall clock read 4:47 p.m., 13 minutes until he needed to leave to pick up Sophie from after-school care. Mercer! His boss, Carlos Martinez, appeared in the doorway of the garage bay holding up a phone. Guy's asking specifically for you. Says his Mercedes is making a weird sound and his regular mechanic's booked solid. Ryan wiped his hands on a red shop towel, already shaking his head. Tell him I'm leaving in 10 minutes. Schedule him for tomorrow. He's offering double rate if you can squeeze him in today. Ryan paused. Double rate meant he could finally replace Sophie's winter coat, the one with the broken zippers she'd been making do with for 3 months. But double rate also meant being late to pick her up, and Sophie had already spent too many afternoons being the last kid waiting by the window. Tomorrow, Ryan said firmly. First thing. Carlos studied him for a moment, then nodded with something like respect. You're a good dad, Mercer. Better than most. The words settled uncomfortably in Ryan's chest as he cleaned up his station. Good dad. Was he? Or was he just a guy doing his best not to screw up the one thing that mattered? The after-school program at Bridgeport Elementary occupied a converted library that smelled like old books and fruit snacks. Ryan arrived at exactly 5 p.m. to find Sophie sitting cross-legged on a reading rug, her dark hair pulled into a messy ponytail, completely absorbed in a book about marine biology. Hey, Soph. She looked up, and her face transformed, the kind of pure, uncomplicated joy that reminded Ryan why every sacrifice was worth it. Dad, did you know octopuses have 3 hearts? I did not know that. He crouched down beside her. Ready to go home. Can we stop at the library? Ms. Chen said they have more books about ocean animals. Ryan calculated quickly. Library stop meant later dinner, which meant later bedtime, which meant less sleep before his 6 a.m. shift tomorrow. But it also meant Sophie's eyes would keep that light in them for a few more hours. Yeah, he said. We can do that. As they walked to his truck, a 2008 Ford F-150 that he'd rebuilt himself, Sophie chattered about her day. Something about a science project, a kid named Marcus who'd shared his cookies, and her teacher's announcement about the upcoming winter concert. Ryan listened with half his attention while the other half cataloged the truck's new concerning rattle and mentally reorganized his budget to account for parts. Dad? Sophie's voice cut through his thoughts. You're doing the thing again. What thing? The thing where your face is here but your brain is at work. Ryan felt the familiar guilt settle in his stomach. Sorry, kiddo. I'm listening. You were saying about the concert. It's in 3 weeks. We're singing songs from different countries. She paused, her voice becoming smaller. There's a part where families come on stage together, but Ms. Rodriguez said it's okay if it's just me since... She trailed off. Since it's just us, Ryan finished gently. Sophie nodded, staring at her shoes. Hey! Ryan stopped walking and knelt so they were eye level. Just us is pretty great, isn't it? Yeah, Sophie said, but he could hear the unspoken words underneath. Just us is great. But sometimes I wish it was more. That evening, after dinner, spaghetti with jarred sauce and frozen meatballs, and homework, math problems that Ryan had to Google how to solve, and a bath, Ryan sat on the edge of Sophie's bed while she picked out a book. Not the octopus one? He asked. I already finished it at after school. She held up a worn copy of Charlotte's Web instead. Can we start this one over? Again? We've read it like 5 times. 6, Sophie corrected, but I like it. So Ryan read about Wilbur the pig and Charlotte the spider, about friendship and loss and the way some things stay with you even after they're gone. His voice caught slightly on the familiar passages, the ones about Charlotte's children leaving to start their own lives while one stayed behind. When he looked down, Sophie was asleep, her hand curled under her chin. Ryan closed the book quietly and studied his daughter's face in the dim light of her nightstand lamp. She had her mother's nose, his stubborn chin, and an expression of absolute trust that terrified him more than anything in the world. Because the truth Ryan had learned the hard way was this: everyone left eventually. Sophie's mother, Jenna, had walked out when Sophie was 18 months old. No big fight, no dramatic scene, just a note on the kitchen counter that said, "I can't do this," in an empty closet where her clothes used to be. Ryan had been 26, working 2 jobs, living in a studio apartment that barely fit a crib. He'd had no idea how to be a single parent, no family nearby to help. His parents had died in a car accident when he was 19, and Jenna's family had made it clear whose side they were on. So he'd figured it out, day by day, mistake by mistake, until the mistakes became fewer and the days became routine. And somewhere along the way, he'd made a decision. Sophie would never feel abandoned again, which meant Ryan couldn't let anyone get close enough to hurt her. It was a simple rule. It had kept them safe for 6 years, and Ryan had no intention of breaking it. Except that 2 weeks later, Marcus Chen, the guy Ryan worked with at the garage who'd somehow become his closest friend despite Ryan's best efforts to avoid close friends, showed up at his apartment with a determined expression and 2 tickets to something called a downtown Seattle business mixer. "Absolutely not," Ryan said without opening the door fully. "You didn't even hear what it is yet." "I heard business mixer, which is 2 words that have nothing to do with my life." Marcus wedged his foot in the doorway. "It's at the Watermark Hotel. Open bar. Free food. I need a wingman because Jessica's making me network for her marketing company, and I'll die of boredom alone." "How is that my problem?" "Because you haven't left this apartment for anything other than work and Sophie's school in approximately 8 months, and I'm worried you're turning into a hermit." "I'm not a hermit. I'm a focused parent." "You're 32, not 70. Come on, 2 hours. Free food. You can leave whenever you want." Marcus paused, playing his trump card. "Jessica's company is doing a raffle. First prize is a year of free car washes. You know Sophie would love that." Ryan hated that Marcus knew his weaknesses. 2 hours, he said finally. "And I'm not networking. I'm eating free food and leaving." "That's the spirit?" The Watermark Hotel lobby was all polished marble and modern art that Ryan didn't understand. People in expensive suits clustered around high-top tables, holding wine glasses and laughing at jokes that probably weren't that funny. Ryan immediately regretted coming. "I'm leaving," he told Marcus. "You've been here 30 seconds. "That's about 30 seconds too long." Ryan gestured at his outfit. Clean jeans, a button-down shirt he'd ironed himself, work boots that he'd scrubbed but couldn't quite get spotless. "I look like I wandered in from a construction site." "You look fine. Now come on, there's the bar." For the next hour, Ryan stood near the buffet table, eating surprisingly good salmon puffs and avoiding eye contact with anyone who looked like they might want to network. Marcus had disappeared into the crowd, presumably networking for Jessica's company, leaving Ryan to contemplate his escape route. He was reaching for his phone to call it a night when someone said, "The salmon's better than the chicken." Ryan turned. The woman standing beside him was probably in her early 30s, with dark hair pulled into a simple twist and eyes that looked almost gray in the hotel lighting. She wore a black dress that was elegant without being showy, and she was studying the buffet with the same slightly overwhelmed expression Ryan probably had. "Yeah?" he said. "Definitely. The chicken's dry. Rookie mistake. They overcooked it, trying to make sure it was safe for the corporate crowd." She glanced at him with a small smile. "I'm Elena." "Ryan." They shook hands. Hers was cool and firm, no nonsense. "So," Elena said, loading her plate with salmon puffs. "What do you do, Ryan?" Here it was, the question that always created distance at events like this. The moment when people's expressions changed from friendly to politely disinterested once they realized he wasn't a fellow entrepreneur or tech executive. "I'm a mechanic," Ryan said, waiting for it. But Elena's expression didn't change. If anything, she looked more interested. What kind of cars? All kinds. Whatever people bring in. Mostly domestic, some imports. A lot of Hondas and Toyotas, occasional BMWs when people realize the dealership charges 3 times what we do. Do you like it? The question caught him off guard. Most people asked about money or made assumptions about his education, or changed the subject entirely. Nobody asked if he liked it. Yeah, Ryan said slowly. I do. There's something satisfying about fixing things. Taking something that's broken and making it work again. Elena nodded thoughtfully. That makes sense. There's probably something meditative about it too, right? Working with your hands, solving problems you can actually see and touch. Exactly. Ryan found himself relaxing slightly. What about you? What do you do? I work in tech, Elena said, which wasn't really an answer, but Ryan didn't push. Lots of meetings. Lots of problems that can't be solved with a wrench. Sounds terrible. She laughed, a genuine sound that made her whole face change. It has its moments. They talked for another 20 minutes, about work in Seattle and the absurdity of networking events where everyone pretended to be interested in everyone else. Elena asked questions like she actually cared about the answers, and Ryan found himself telling her about the time he'd accidentally rebuilt an engine backward and had to start over from scratch. Backward? Elena's eyes widened. How was that even possible? Extreme sleep deprivation and extreme stupidity. My daughter was about 2, not sleeping through the night, and I thought I could work on the engine during her naps. Ryan shook his head at the memory. Took me 3 days to figure out why it wouldn't turn over. You have a daughter? Elena's tone was curious, not judgmental. Ryan felt his walls start to go up automatically. This was usually where things ended, where women who seemed interested suddenly remembered they had somewhere else to be. Yeah, he said carefully. Sophie, she's 7. That's a good age, Elena said. Old enough to have real conversations, young enough to still think you're cool. Ryan laughed despite himself. That's actually accurate. My nephew's 8. The coolness window is definitely closing for his parents. They kept talking about kids and Seattle traffic and the best coffee shops downtown. At some point, Marcus reappeared, looking delighted to find Ryan actually conversing with another human being, but he had the sense to disappear again quickly. When the event started winding down, Elena glanced at her watch, a simple leather band, nothing flashy, and seemed surprised by the time. I should go, she said. But this was nice, really nice. Yeah, Ryan agreed, meaning it. Elena hesitated, then said, Would you want to grab dinner sometime? Actual dinner, not conference room salmon. Every instinct in Ryan's body screamed at him to make up an excuse, to protect the simple, safe life he'd built for himself and Sophie, to stick to the rule that had kept them both from getting hurt. But something about Elena's direct gaze and genuine smile made him pause. Okay, he heard himself say. Yeah, dinner sounds good. Elena's smile widened. She pulled out her phone. Give me your number. They exchanged information, and Elena promised to text him about scheduling. Then she thanked him for the company and disappeared into the thinning crowd, leaving Ryan standing alone by the buffet table, wondering what the hell he'd just agreed to. Marcus materialized immediately. Dude, don't. You just got asked out by... I said don't. A woman who seemed genuinely interested in your engine stories. Do you know how rare that is? Ryan ignored him and headed for the exit, but he couldn't quite suppress the small smile that kept trying to break through his carefully maintained composure. That night, after the babysitter left and Ryan checked on Sophie, who'd had a great evening watching nature documentaries, according to the sitter, he sat on his couch in the dark apartment and stared at his phone. Elena had already texted. Thanks for making that event bearable. Let me know what nights work for you. Simple, direct, no games. Ryan typed and deleted 3 different responses before finally settling on, Weeknights are tough. Saturday work for you? The response came quickly. Saturday's perfect. I know a place in Capitol Hill if you trust me to pick. I trust you. He sent it before he could overthink it, then immediately overthought it anyway. Was that too forward, too casual? Did it sound like he was interested in more than just dinner? Was he interested in more than just dinner? Ryan set down the phone and rubbed his face. This was exactly why he avoided dating. It was complicated, messy, full of ways to make mistakes that could ripple out and affect Sophie. But then he thought about Elena's laugh. The way she'd asked about cars like she actually wanted to know. The fact that when he'd mentioned Sophie, she hadn't flinched or made excuses. His phone buzzed. Great. I'll send you the address. Looking forward to it. Looking forward to it. Ryan realized, with something like surprise, that he was too. Well, the week leading up to Saturday moved strangely. Work was the usual chaos, a transmission that needed rebuilding, a timing belt replacement that took twice as long as it should have, a customer who insisted their check engine light was a conspiracy by mechanics to make money. But underneath the routine, Ryan found himself thinking about the upcoming dinner more than he wanted to admit. He told Sophie he had plans Saturday evening, keeping it vague. Plans with who? She asked, looking up from her homework. A friend. What friend? Marcus? A new friend. Sophie's eyes narrowed with the suspicious intelligence of a 7-year-old who knew when her father was being evasive. A new friend you're being weird about? I'm not being weird. You're definitely being weird. You've checked your phone like 50 times today. That's an exaggeration. Only a little bit? Sophie returned to her math problems, then added casually, Is it a girl? Ryan nearly dropped the dish he was washing. What? Your new friend. Is it a girl you like? Where did that come from? Marcus told me you met someone at that party thing. Ryan made a mental note to kill Marcus. It's just dinner, with an acquaintance. Uh-huh. Sophie didn't sound convinced. Are you nervous? No. Your voice went up. It always goes up when you're lying about feelings. How do you know that? Because I'm 7, not stupid. Ryan had to laugh. Fair enough. Yeah, maybe I'm a little nervous. That's okay, Sophie said generously. Being nervous about new things is normal. That's what Ms. Rodriguez says. Ms. Rodriguez sounds very wise. She is. Sophie finished her math problem with a flourish. So, what's her name? Elena. Is she nice? I think so. I don't know her that well yet. Sophie considered this. Well, if she's mean, you can just leave. That's what I do when kids are mean at school. That's good advice, Soph. I know. She started packing up her homework. Can we have ice cream? After dinner. But what if I want ice cream for dinner? Then you'd have a very understanding but ultimately responsible father who says no. Sophie giggled, the conversation about Elena apparently forgotten, and Ryan felt the familiar tension in his chest ease slightly. Maybe this would be fine. Maybe it was just dinner with someone interesting, and then they'd both go back to their separate lives, and nothing would have to change. Maybe he could do this without risking everything he'd built. Saturday arrived cold and clear, the kind of November day where Seattle's beauty felt almost defiant against the approaching winter. Ryan dropped Sophie off at Marcus and Jessica's house for a sleepover with their daughter, Emma. Sophie hugged him goodbye without a trace of the separation anxiety she'd had when she was younger, which made Ryan both proud and vaguely sad. Have fun with Elena, Sophie called out as she ran inside, and Ryan heard Jessica's delighted laughter from the doorway. So much for keeping it quiet, Ryan muttered. Marcus appeared, grinning. Dude, you're going on an actual date with a woman who seemed cool. This is huge. It's just dinner. Keep telling yourself that. Marcus clapped him on the shoulder. Have fun. Don't overthink it. And for the love of God, don't talk about engine compression ratios. I make no promises. The restaurant Elena had chosen was called Harvest, tucked into a quiet corner of Capitol Hill. It was small and warm, with exposed brick walls and soft lighting that made everything feel intimate without being overwhelming. Ryan arrived 5 minutes early and spent those 5 minutes sitting in his truck, giving himself a pep talk that felt ridiculous even as he did it. It's just dinner. You've had dinner thousands of times. This is the same thing, just with another person. A person you barely know. A person who might expect you to be interesting and articulate instead of your normal, socially awkward self. This was a terrible idea, he said out loud. Then his phone buzzed. I'm here. Inside at a table by the window. No backing out now. Ryan checked his reflection in the rearview mirror one last time. Clean shave, hair that he'd actually styled with something other than water, a dark blue button-down that Sophie had insisted made his eyes look nice, and got out of the truck before he could change his mind. Elena was exactly where she said she'd be, sitting at a small table with a view of the street. She'd traded the black dress from the mixer for dark jeans and a soft gray sweater, her hair down around her shoulders. When she saw him, she smiled. "You made it," she said as he sat down. "Was there doubt?" "I figured there was a 50-50 chance you'd panic and ghost." Ryan laughed, caught off guard by her directness. "The thought crossed my mind." "At least you're honest." Elena handed him a menu. "I haven't ordered yet. The server said everything's good, which is either very true or very much a lie." They spent the next few minutes studying the menu, and Ryan was grateful for something to do with his hands and eyes that wasn't trying to make conversation. But when the server came, a young guy with impressive facial hair who introduced himself as Tyler and took their orders, Ryan found himself facing the thing he'd been dreading, actual conversation. But Elena made it easy. She asked about his week, about the garage, about the most interesting car he'd worked on lately. Ryan found himself telling her about a 1967 Mustang that had come in, its owner wanting a full restoration. "It's going to take months," Ryan explained, "but the owner doesn't care. His dad owned the same model, same color, died a few years ago. This is his way of, I don't know, keeping something alive." "That's beautiful," Elena said softly. "It's also incredibly expensive, but yeah, there's something beautiful about it too." Their food arrived. Ryan had ordered some kind of chicken dish that turned out to be incredible, and Elena had gotten salmon that she immediately offered to let him try. "Only if I can give you some of this," Ryan said, and they traded bites like old friends rather than people on a first date. The conversation flowed. Elena talked about growing up in Portland, about moving to Seattle for college and never leaving, about her love of hiking and her complete inability to keep plants alive. "I've killed every succulent I've ever owned," she admitted, "which is supposed to be impossible." "It's definitely impressive," Ryan agreed. "What about you? Are you a plant person?" "I have a cactus named Steve that Sophie and I take care of. He's thriving, but I think that's mostly because we forget about him for weeks at a time, and it turns out that's exactly what cacti want." Elena laughed, and Ryan felt something loosen in his chest, that constant tension he carried, the vigilance that never quite let him relax. Halfway through dinner, Elena leaned back in her chair and said, "Can I ask you something personal?" Ryan's guard went up immediately. "Okay. Sophie's mom, is she in the picture?" There it was. The question Ryan had been waiting for, the one that usually ended things before they really started. He set down his fork carefully. "No, she left when Sophie was about 1.5 years. Haven't heard from her since." "I'm sorry." "Don't be. We're better off." Ryan meant it, mostly. "It's been just us for a while now. We have a good routine." "I'm sure you do." Elena's expression was thoughtful, not pitying. "But that must be exhausting. Being everything for someone all the time." No one had ever said that to Ryan before. People praised him for stepping up, for being a good dad, for handling single parenthood. But no one had acknowledged that it was exhausting. "Yeah," he said quietly. "Sometimes it is." "Well, for what it's worth, she's missing out. Both of them are." The certainty in Elena's voice did something to Ryan's carefully maintained composure. He felt the walls he'd built start to crack just slightly. "Your turn," he said, needing to shift the focus. "Tell me something personal." Elena considered. "Okay, I'm terrible at relationships." "How terrible?" "I work too much. I forget to text back. I have trouble letting people in, I guess. My last boyfriend told me I treated our relationship like a business merger. Ouch." "Yeah, he wasn't wrong." Elena smiled ruefully. "I'm very good at my job. I'm very bad at everything else. I find that hard to believe. Give it time. You'll see." But she said it lightly, like she was joking, and Ryan found himself wanting to prove her wrong, to show her that whatever flaws she thought she had, they weren't deal breakers, which was a dangerous thought to have on a first date. They talked for 2 more hours, long after they'd finished eating, and the restaurant had started to empty out. Tyler, the server, kept refilling their water glasses with increasingly obvious hints that maybe they should consider leaving, but neither of them moved. Finally, Elena glanced at her watch and sighed. "I should probably let them close." Probably. Outside, the November air was sharp and cold. Ryan walked Elena to her car, a sleek black Audi that probably cost more than Ryan made in a year. "Thank you for tonight," Elena said. "I had a really good time." "Me too." They stood there awkwardly for a moment, and Ryan realized he had no idea what the protocol was. Did he hug her, shake her hand, stand there like an idiot? Elena solved the problem by stepping forward and kissing his cheek, brief and warm. "Let's do this again," she said. "Yeah," Ryan managed. "Definitely." He waited until she drove away before walking to his truck, where he sat for a full 5 minutes, replaying the entire evening and trying to figure out what the hell he was doing. His phone buzzed. "Thanks again for tonight. You're good company, Ryan Mercer." He smiled and typed back. "So are you, Elena Ward." And for the first time in 6 years, Ryan let himself consider the possibility that maybe, just maybe, he could do this. He could let someone in without everything falling apart. It was a terrifying thought, but as he drove home through the quiet Seattle streets, he couldn't quite make himself regret it. The week after their first date passed in a blur of text messages and unexpected phone calls that stretched past midnight. Elena had a way of asking questions that made Ryan think about things he'd stopped examining years ago. Why he'd chosen to be a mechanic instead of going to college. What he'd wanted to be when he was Sophie's age. Whether he'd ever left Seattle. Once, Ryan told her during one of those late-night calls, his voice low so he wouldn't wake Sophie. "Drove down to California right after high school. Made it as far as Sacramento before I realized I had no plan and about $200 to my name." "What did you do?" "Turned around and came home. Got a job at Martinez's garage the next week. Been there ever since." "Do you ever regret it, not seeing what else was out there?" Ryan thought about it, really thought about it. "Sometimes. But then Sophie happened, and regret kind of became a luxury I couldn't afford. You don't get to wonder about the road not taken when you've got a kid depending on you." There was a pause on the other end of the line. Then Elena said quietly, "That's probably the most grown-up thing I've ever heard anyone say." "Yeah, well, single parenthood ages you fast." They met for coffee twice that week. Quick meetings during Ryan's lunch break where they sat in a corner booth at a place called Grounds and talked about everything and nothing. Elena told him about a disastrous presentation she'd given, about her assistant who kept scheduling meetings at impossible times, about her complete inability to cook anything more complicated than scrambled eggs. "I once set a salad on fire," she admitted. Ryan choked on his coffee. "How do you set a salad on fire?" The details are embarrassing and involve a candle and poor spatial awareness. "I need to hear this story." "Absolutely not. Some secrets die with me." But she was laughing, and Ryan realized he'd started measuring his days by these moments. The brief windows when he got to sit across from Elena and forget about transmission fluid and overdue bills and the constant weight of responsibility. By Friday, he'd worked up the courage to ask her to dinner again. Actual dinner, not coffee. And this time, he wanted to cook. "You cook?" Elena sounded surprised. "I have a 7-year-old. If I didn't cook, we'd live on chicken nuggets and regret." "A fair point. What did you have in mind?" "Come over tomorrow night. I'll make you the only thing I'm actually good at making, which is my mom's lasagna recipe. Sophie will be at a friend's birthday sleepover, so it'll just be us." The words hung there for a moment, weighted with meaning Ryan hadn't entirely intended. "Just us sounds perfect," Elena said. Ryan spent Saturday afternoon cleaning his apartment with a level of intensity that Sophie would have found hilarious. He scrubbed baseboards he hadn't looked at in months, organized the bookshelf that had become a chaotic pile of Sophie's school papers and library books, even changed the light bulb in the hallway that had been out since October. The lasagna went into the oven at 5:30. Elena was due at 6. At 5:50, Ryan changed his shirt for the third time, settling on a simple black Henley that didn't look like he was trying too hard. At 5:55, he second-guessed the wine he'd bought. Was a $15 bottle insulting? Did Elena even drink red wine? Should he have asked? At exactly 6 o'clock, there was a knock on the door. Elena stood in the hallway holding a bakery box and wearing jeans and a dark green sweater that made her eyes look more hazel than gray. Her hair was loose, and she looked nervous in a way that somehow made Ryan feel less nervous himself. "I brought dessert," she said, holding up the box. I didn't make it because we've established I'm a kitchen disaster, but I picked it out myself, which feels like it should count for something. It absolutely counts. Ryan stepped back to let her in, trying to see his apartment through her eyes. It was small, a two-bedroom with a kitchen that opened into the living room, furniture that was practical rather than stylish, walls decorated mostly with Sophie's artwork. Nothing like what he imagined Elena's place looked like. But she didn't seem to notice or care. She set the bakery box on the counter and looked around with genuine interest. "This is nice," she said. "It feels like a home." As opposed to what? As opposed to a showroom or a hotel. She gestured at a crayon drawing of what might have been a rainbow, or possibly a very abstract dinosaur. "I love this." Sophie's Picasso phase. She informed me that realistic art is boring and shapes have feelings. Smart kid. They ate dinner at Ryan's small kitchen table, the one he and Sophie used every night for homework and breakfast, and the occasional game of cards. The lasagna turned out well, and Elena praised it with an enthusiasm that seemed genuine rather than polite. "This is incredible," she said, going back for a second helping. "You're wasted as a mechanic. You should open a restaurant." "Yeah, because the restaurant industry is known for its great work-life balance and low stress levels." "Good point." Elena took another bite, then asked the question Ryan had been both expecting and dreading. "So tell me about Sophie. Really tell me. What's she like?" Ryan set down his fork, considering how to answer. Most people asked about Sophie out of politeness, waiting for him to give a brief, sanitized response before changing the subject. But Elena's expression suggested she actually wanted to know. "She's—" Ryan started, then stopped. "She's everything. Smart, funny, stubborn as hell. She's got this thing where she fixates on topics and learns everything about them. Last month it was octopuses. This month it's deep-sea creatures. She made me watch a documentary about anglerfish that gave me nightmares." Elena laughed. "Sounds intense." "She is, but in the best way." Ryan paused, then decided to be honest. "She's also anxious sometimes. Worries about things kids shouldn't have to worry about. Whether I'm going to come home from work, whether we have enough money, whether the people in her life are going to leave. Because of her mom. Yeah, she doesn't remember Jenna leaving, but she knows it happened, and I think some part of her is always waiting for it to happen again." Elena nodded slowly. "That's a lot for a 7-year-old to carry." "It is, which is why I'm careful about—" Ryan gestured vaguely between them. "This. Whatever this is." "You're careful about who you introduce her to?" "I don't introduce her to anyone. You'd be the first." The weight of that statement settled over the table. Elena looked at him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. "That's not a responsibility I take lightly," she said finally. "Good. Because I don't either." They finished dinner in comfortable silence, then moved to the couch with the dessert Elena had brought. Some kind of chocolate thing that was probably too fancy for Ryan's apartment, but tasted amazing anyway. "Okay," Elena said, curling her legs underneath her. "My turn for honesty." "I'm listening." "I told you I work in tech, which is true, but also deliberately vague." She took a breath. "I'm the CEO of a company called Helix Technologies. We do cloud-based data solutions for healthcare providers." Ryan blinked. "You're a CEO?" "Yeah." "Like an actual CEO, with a board and employees and everything?" "About 300 employees, actually, and yes, a board who mostly tolerates me." Ryan processed this information, trying to reconcile it with the woman sitting on his couch, eating chocolate cake and laughing at his terrible jokes. "Why didn't you tell me before?" "Because people get weird about it. Either they're intimidated, or they suddenly see me as a walking dollar sign, or they can't separate me from my job." Elena met his eyes. "But when I met you at that mixer, you talked to me like I was just a person, and I really like that." "You are just a person." "See, that right there. That's why I'm telling you now." She set down her plate. "I don't want there to be secrets between us, and I need you to understand that my job is demanding and sometimes ridiculous, and I'm not always good at balancing it with the rest of my life. But I'm trying to be better at that." Ryan didn't know what to say. A CEO. He was dating a CEO. Someone who probably had more money in her checking account than he'd make in 5 years. Someone who lived in a completely different world. You're doing the thing, Elena said. What thing? The thing where you're creating distance in your head. I can see it happening. She was right. Ryan could feel himself pulling back, his brain already cataloging all the reasons this couldn't work, all the ways their lives were incompatible. I don't know how to do this, he admitted. Date someone who's, you know, rich, powerful, capable of setting salads on fire? Despite himself, Ryan smiled. All of the above. Well, I don't know how to date someone who has a kid and an actual life outside of work. So we're both figuring it out. Elena shifted closer. But here's what I do know. I like you, Ryan Mercer. I like that you're honest and careful, and you remember the little things people say. I like that you care more about being a good dad than impressing anyone. And I really like that you haven't once asked me for business advice or a job or an investment opportunity. That's happened? More times than you'd believe. Ryan looked at her, really looked at her, not as a CEO or someone from a different world, but as Elena, the woman who called him at midnight just to talk, who asked about his day and seemed to actually care about the answer, who was sitting on his couch right now looking nervous and hopeful and real. I like you too, he said quietly. That's what scares me. Why? Because Sophie likes routine and safety and knowing what to expect, and he gestured helplessly. You're a variable I can't control. What if she gets attached and then you realize this isn't what you want? What if you meet her and decide that dating a single dad is too complicated? What if... Elena kissed him. It was soft and brief, just enough to stop the spiral of anxiety from consuming him completely. When she pulled back, she kept her hand on his cheek. What if it works? She said. What if you stop borrowing tomorrow's problems and just let this be what it is right now? Which is what? Two people who like each other, eating cake on a couch, figuring things out as they go. Ryan wanted to argue, to list all the logical reasons why this was a terrible idea. But Elena was looking at him with those hazel eyes, and her hand was warm against his face. And for the first time in years, he let himself stop thinking about all the ways things could go wrong. He kissed her back. They stayed on the couch for hours, talking and kissing and occasionally remembering to eat more cake. Elena told him about growing up with parents who expected perfection, about building her company from nothing, about the loneliness that came with being in charge of everything all the time. Ryan told her about his parents' death, about learning to be a father when he barely knew how to be an adult, about the fear that he was screwing up Sophie's life, even as he tried his best not to. You're not screwing up her life, Elena said firmly. She's lucky to have you. You haven't met her yet. I don't need to meet her to know that. But even as she said it, Ryan could see the question in her eyes. The same question that had been building between them all evening. When? When would he take that step? When would he risk introducing the most important person in his life to someone who might not stay? Elena must have read his expression because she said, "No pressure. Whenever you're ready, or if you're never ready, we'll figure that out too." You'd be okay with that? Never meeting her? No, Elena admitted. But I'd understand, and I'd rather have you in my life without meeting Sophie than not have you at all. The honesty of it broke something open in Ryan's chest. He pulled her closer, pressing his forehead against hers. Give me some time, he said, to figure out how to do this right. Take all the time you need. But they both knew that time was already working against them, because the longer they saw each other, the harder it would be to keep those worlds separate. And eventually, Ryan would have to make a choice. Elena left around midnight, and they stood in the doorway for 10 minutes saying goodbye like teenagers who didn't want the night to end. When she finally walked down the hallway to the elevator, Ryan watched until the doors closed, then went back inside to an apartment that suddenly felt too quiet. His phone buzzed almost immediately. Thank you for tonight. For trusting me with the hard stuff. Ryan smiled and typed back, Thank you for not running when you heard about all my baggage. Your baggage is part of the package. And the package is pretty great. He fell asleep on the couch, phone in hand, feeling something he'd almost forgotten how to feel. Hopeful. The next morning, Ryan picked up Sophie from her sleepover to find her wired on birthday cake and completely unwilling to nap. We played games until 3 in the morning, she announced proudly in the truck. Emma's mom said we were being ridiculous, but she let us anyway. Sounds like you had fun. I did. We watched movies and ate so much pizza, and Emma showed me her new hamster, and Sophie stopped abruptly. Dad, you're smiling weird. I'm not smiling weird. You are. You look like you did when I drew you that card for Father's Day, all soft. Ryan tried to rearrange his face into something more neutral. I'm just glad you had a good time. It's because of Elena, isn't it? So much for keeping things separate. What makes you say that? Because you've been checking your phone every 5 seconds, and sometimes you smile at it for no reason. That's what happens in movies when people like each other. Ryan glanced at his daughter, who was watching him with those two observant eyes that missed nothing. Yeah, he admitted. I like her. Are you going to marry her? Sophie, I've known her for 3 weeks. That's not an answer. The answer is I don't know. We're just spending time together, getting to know each other. Sophie processed this with the seriousness of a judge weighing evidence. Is she nice to you? Very nice. Does she make you laugh? She does. Does she know about me? Yes. I told her about you right away. And she didn't run away? The question hit Ryan harder than it should have. He pulled the truck into their apartment complex parking lot and turned to face Sophie fully. No, sweetheart. She didn't run away. She thought it was great that I had you. Sophie nodded slowly, then asked the question Ryan had been dreading. Can I meet her? His first instinct was to say no, to protect Sophie from the possibility of disappointment, to maintain the safe boundaries he'd established. But looking at his daughter's hopeful expression, Ryan realized something. He wasn't the only one who'd been living in a carefully controlled bubble. Sophie had been too, and maybe that wasn't entirely fair to her either. Maybe, he said carefully, if things keep going well. Would you want to meet her? I think so. I want to see what kind of person makes you do the soft smile. Ryan laughed despite the anxiety churning in his stomach. The soft smile. Yeah, it's different from your normal smile. It's like gentler. Like you're thinking about something that makes you happy instead of worried. Out of the mouths of babes. That evening, after Sophie had finally crashed from her sleepover sugar high, Ryan called Elena. Sophie asked to meet you, he said without preamble. There was a pause, then, what did you tell her? That maybe, if things keep going well. And are things going well? Ryan thought about the night before, about Elena on his couch, her honesty and vulnerability and willingness to deal with all his complicated baggage. Yeah, he said, things are going really well. So what are you thinking? I'm thinking I'm terrified. And I'm thinking that maybe being terrified means I care enough to be careful. And I'm thinking that Sophie deserves to see that sometimes good things happen, not just people leaving. That's a lot of thinking. I do that. Think too much. Elena's voice softened. Ryan, I meant what I said. No pressure. But if you want to do this, I'm ready. I'll follow your lead completely. Okay? Ryan took a breath. Okay. Let me talk to Sophie. Make sure she understands this isn't, I don't know, a commitment or anything. Just meeting someone who's important to me. That's exactly what it is. They made plans for the following Saturday. Something casual, the park near Ryan's apartment, early afternoon. Low pressure, easy exit if things got weird. Ryan spent the week preparing Sophie, trying to gauge her understanding of what this meeting meant without making it seem like a bigger deal than it needed to be, which was impossible because it was a huge deal and Sophie knew it. Is she pretty? Sophie asked on Thursday. I think so. What does she look like? Dark hair, nice smile, about this tall. Ryan held his hand up to approximate Elena's height. Does she like kids? I think she does, but you'll have to decide that for yourself. What if I don't like her? Ryan stopped what he was doing, dishes, always dishes, and turned to face his daughter. Then we'll deal with that. Your opinion matters more than anyone else's. Really? Really? You're my priority, Soph, always. She seemed satisfied with that answer, but Ryan could see the anxiety underneath her questions. The same anxiety he felt, magnified through a 7-year-old's understanding of the world. Friday night, Elena called in a panic. I bought a stuffed animal, she said. A sea turtle, because you said Sophie likes ocean things. But now I'm worried that's too much? Like I'm trying too hard? Should I bring it, or is that weird? Ryan smiled at the image of CEO Elena Ward spiraling over a stuffed turtle. Bring it, she'll love it. You're sure? I'm sure. Elena, she's gonna like you. You can't know that. I can. Because you're the kind of person who worries about bringing the right stuffed animal to meet a 7-year-old. That's exactly the kind of person she needs to see in her life. There was silence on the other end, then a shaky breath. I'm really nervous. Me too. If this goes badly, it won't. But if it does, then we'll figure it out together. Saturday arrived with unseasonably warm weather, the kind of late November day that felt like a gift. Ryan and Sophie walked to the park, which was only 3 blocks from their apartment and had a good playground plus plenty of open space. Sophie had changed her outfit 4 times that morning, finally settling on jeans and her favorite sweater, purple with a sparkly narwhal on it. She'd insisted on brushing her hair herself, which meant it was slightly lopsided, but Ryan didn't have the heart to fix it. What if she doesn't like me? Sophie asked as they walked. Impossible. You're extremely likable. Dad, I'm being serious. So am I. Ryan squeezed her hand. But remember what we talked about. This is just meeting someone new. No big expectations, okay? Okay. But her hand was sweaty in his, and Ryan knew she was just as nervous as he was. Elena was already there, sitting on a bench near the playground. She stood up when she saw them, and Ryan noticed she was wearing jeans and boots and a casual jacket. Nothing too formal or intimidating. The stuffed sea turtle was visible in her bag. Hi, Elena said, her voice steadier than Ryan expected. Hi, Ryan replied. Elena, this is Sophie. Sophie, this is Elena. Sophie studied Elena with the intense scrutiny only children can pull off. Elena, to her credit, didn't try to fill the silence with nervous chatter. She just smiled and waited. You're taller than I thought you'd be, Sophie finally said. Elena laughed, surprised. Is that good or bad? I haven't decided yet. Sophie tilted her head. Dad says you work with computers. I do. My company helps hospitals keep track of important medical information so doctors can take better care of people. That sounds important. It is. What about you? What do you like to do? I like learning about ocean animals and reading, and sometimes art, but only if I can use whatever colors I want because rules about colors are dumb. Rules about colors are definitely dumb, Elena agreed seriously. Sophie seemed to approve of this answer. She glanced at Ryan, then back at Elena, making some kind of internal calculation. Do you want to see the playground? Sophie asked. It has really good swings. I'd love to. They walked over to the playground together, and Ryan followed a few steps behind, giving them space but staying close enough to intervene if needed. But Sophie was already pointing out her favorite spots, the slide that went really fast, the monkey bars she was learning to cross by herself, the tree where a family of crows lived and sometimes dropped acorns on people's heads. Elena listened to all of it with genuine interest, asking questions and laughing at Sophie's stories. When Sophie ran off to demonstrate her skills on the monkey bars, Elena came to stand beside Ryan. She's wonderful, Elena said quietly. Yeah, she is. Those eyes, Ryan. She doesn't miss anything. I know. It's terrifying. They watched Sophie make it halfway across the monkey bars before dropping to the ground with a frustrated grunt. Almost, Elena called out encouragingly. Sophie trotted back over, slightly out of breath. I can get further if someone counts. It helps me focus. I can count, Elena offered. Sophie considered this, then nodded. Okay, but you have to count slow and clear. Slow and clear, got it. For the next 20 minutes, Elena counted while Sophie attempted the monkey bars over and over, each time making it a little further. When she finally made it all the way across, Sophie's shriek of triumph probably scared every bird in a 3-block radius. Did you see? Did you see? Sophie ran over to them, jumping up and down. That was amazing. Elena high-fived her, and Sophie beamed. They sat on the bench together, Sophie in the middle, swinging her legs and talking a mile a minute about everything from monkey bars to the injustice of bedtimes to her upcoming winter concert. You should come, Sophie said suddenly, looking at Elena. To the concert. We're singing songs from different countries, and it's in 3 weeks, and parents can bring guests. Ryan's heart stopped. He hadn't expected Sophie to extend that invitation, hadn't prepared for it. Elena glanced at him, clearly asking permission with her eyes. "If your dad thinks that's okay," Elena said carefully, "I'd really love to come." Sophie looked at Ryan expectantly. "Yeah," Ryan heard himself say. "That would be great." Sophie's smile could have lit up the entire park. After another hour of playing, during which Elena proved surprisingly good at tag and completely terrible at hopscotch, they decided to get ice cream from a truck parked near the park entrance. "Even though it's basically winter?" Ryan asked. "Especially because it's basically winter," Sophie insisted. "Ice cream tastes better when it's cold outside. That's science." "I don't think that's science. It's my science." Elena laughed and offered to buy, which Sophie accepted with enthusiasm. They sat on a different bench, eating their ice cream and watching other families play in the park. "Elena," Sophie said, chocolate ice cream smeared on her chin, "can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Are you going to disappear?" The question landed like a stone. Ryan froze, his ice cream forgotten. This was the moment he'd been dreading, the question that revealed all of Sophie's carefully hidden fears. But Elena didn't flinch. She set down her ice cream and turned to face Sophie directly. "I don't disappear," she said gently but firmly. "When I care about people, I show up, even when things are hard, even when it would be easier not to." "How do I know that's true?" "You don't. Not yet. You're just going to have to watch and see if my actions match my words." Sophie thought about this, her small face serious. "Okay, but if you do disappear, I'm going to be really mad." "That's fair," Elena said. "I would be too." Satisfied, Sophie returned to her ice cream. But Ryan saw Elena's hand shaking slightly as she picked up her cone again, saw the shimmer in her eyes that she was trying to hide. Later, after they'd said goodbye and Sophie had thanked Elena for the stuffed turtle, which she'd clutched for the entire walk home, Ryan tucked his daughter into bed. "I like her," Sophie announced. "Yeah?" "Yeah, she's nice, and she didn't treat me like a baby." "I'm glad." "Dad?" Sophie's voice got smaller. "Do you think she'll really stay?" Ryan sat on the edge of her bed, brushing hair off her forehead. "I think she's going to try really hard. But you know what? Even if things don't work out exactly how we hope, it doesn't mean she stopped caring. Sometimes adults have to make hard choices that aren't about not caring." "Like Mom?" The question surprised him. Sophie rarely brought up Jenna directly. "Your mom made her choice for her own reasons," Ryan said carefully. "It wasn't about you not being enough or not being lovable. It was about her not being ready. Is Elena ready?" "I think so, but we're going to take our time and figure this out together, okay? All three of us." Sophie nodded sleepily. "I hope it works out. She counts really good." Ryan smiled and kissed her forehead. "She does count really good." After Sophie fell asleep, Ryan stepped outside onto his small balcony and called Elena. "How are you?" he asked. "Emotionally exhausted and also weirdly energized?" She laughed shakily. "That was intense. Sophie can be intense." She asked the question I would have asked if I were her. She's protecting herself. And you. "I know." "Ryan, I meant what I said to her. I'm not going anywhere. This is—" Elena paused. "This matters to me. You both matter to me." Ryan gripped the balcony railing, looking out at the Seattle skyline in the distance. "You matter to us too, which is what scares me." "I know, but maybe we can be scared together and do it anyway?" "Yeah," Ryan said softly. "Maybe we can." They talked for another hour, processing the day and making plans for the next week. And when Ryan finally went to bed, he realized something had shifted. The walls he'd built so carefully around his life had been breached, not by force, but by invitation. And for the first time in 6 years, that didn't terrify him quite as much as it probably should have. Over the next 3 weeks, Elena became part of their routine in ways Ryan hadn't anticipated. She showed up at Sophie's school concert wearing a simple blue dress and sitting in the back row so she wouldn't intrude. But Sophie had spotted her immediately and waved so enthusiastically she nearly fell off the risers. After the concert, they'd gone for pizza, and Sophie had insisted on sitting between them in the booth, talking non-stop about how Michael Chen had forgotten the words to the French song and how her teacher had said her solo part was beautiful. "You had a solo?" Elena had asked, eyes widening. "Just 2 lines, But Ms. Rodriguez said I projected really well. That's amazing, Sophie. And the way Elena said it, with genuine pride rather than patronizing adult voice, had made Sophie beam brighter than stage lights. On Tuesday evenings, Elena started joining them for dinner. Nothing fancy, just whatever Ryan cooked after work. Spaghetti, tacos, stir-fry that sometimes turned out great and sometimes turned out questionable. Elena would arrive around 6:30 with wine for her and Ryan, juice boxes for Sophie, and stories from her day that she translated into 7-year-old friendly language. So this doctor called me today. Very angry, Elena said one evening while helping Sophie set the table. He said our system lost all his patient files. Did it? Sophie asked, eyes wide. Nope. Turns out he'd been saving everything to his desktop instead of the cloud, and when his computer updated, he couldn't find anything. What did you do? I had my team walk him through how to use the system properly. Then I sent him a very polite email about reading instruction manuals. Did you actually send that? Ryan asked from the stove, stirring sauce. No, but I wanted to. Elena grinned. I sent a nice email about how we're here to help and please don't hesitate to call support. That's boring, Sophie pronounced. You should have sent the other one. Sophie, Ryan warned. What? Sometimes adults need to be told when they're being dumb. Elena burst out laughing, and even Ryan had to smile despite himself. These were the moments that scared him most. Not the big gestures or dramatic declarations, but the small domestic scenes that felt too comfortable, too right. Sophie helping Elena fold napkins. Elena remembering that Sophie hated mushrooms and picking them out of her portion without being asked. The way Sophie had started saying, when Elena comes over, instead of if Elena comes over. On Friday nights, if Sophie was at a sleepover or with Marcus and Jessica, Ryan and Elena would have date nights. Sometimes they went out to restaurants or movies or once to a comedy show that had them laughing so hard Ryan's ribs hurt. But more often, they stayed in at Elena's place, a beautiful condo overlooking Elliott Bay that made Ryan acutely aware of their different worlds. Stop it, Elena said one evening, catching him staring at her kitchen, which was bigger than his entire living room. Stop what? Doing the math in your head, calculating how many years you'd have to work to afford a place like this. I wasn't. You were. You get this look. She came up behind him, wrapping her arms around his waist. I don't care about any of that, Ryan. I care about you. How can you not care? This is your life. Boardrooms and business deals and condos with water views. I fix cars and live in a 2-bedroom apartment with a permanently broken dishwasher. Elena turned him around to face her. You know what I did before I met you? I worked 80, 90 hours a week. I sat in this expensive condo alone, ordering takeout, answering emails at midnight, and wondering why I felt so empty when I'd achieved everything I was supposed to want. Elena, I'm not finished. Then I met a guy at a networking event who talked about cars like they were puzzles worth solving, who left early to pick up his daughter, who cooked me dinner in his small apartment and made me feel more at home than I'd felt in years. Her eyes were fierce. So no, I don't care about the money or the job titles or any of it. I care that you make me feel like a person instead of a position. Ryan kissed her because he didn't have words for the feeling in his chest. They ended up on her couch, the Seattle skyline glittering through the floor-to-ceiling windows. And for a while, Ryan let himself forget about all the reasons this shouldn't work. But the fears always came back. Usually late at night, when he was alone in his apartment and Sophie was asleep, and the quiet let his thoughts run wild. What happened when Elena got tired of slumming it with a mechanic? What happened when she realized that dating someone with a kid meant canceled plans and early nights and complications? What happened when the novelty wore off and she remembered she could have anyone, someone from her world who understood boardrooms and stock options and whatever else CEOs talked about? Marcus noticed his spiral during a slow afternoon at the garage. You're doing it again, Marcus said, rolling out from under a Subaru. Doing what? Sabotaging yourself before anyone else can. I'm not. You are. I've known you for 6 years, man. I've watched you keep everyone at arm's length because you're terrified of Sophie getting hurt. But Elena's not everyone. She's stuck around, she shows up, and you're looking for reasons to push her away before she can leave on her own. Ryan set down his wrench harder than necessary. You don't know what you're talking about, don't I? How many times have you texted Elena this week? I don't know. Normal amount.
You texted her twice. She texted you 17 times. I know because Jessica told me, and Jessica knows because Elena's worried she's overwhelming you. She's not. Then why are you pulling away? Why are you canceling plans? Why did you tell her you couldn't do dinner Wednesday when I know for a fact Sophie was at Jessica's house that night? Ryan didn't have a good answer, or rather, he had too many answers, all of them wrapped up in fear and self-protection and the certainty that good things didn't last. I'm protecting Sophie, he said finally. Bullshit. You're protecting yourself.
Marcus wiped his hands on a rag, his expression softer. Look, I get it. Jenna screwed you over, but Elena isn't Jenna, and Sophie isn't a baby anymore. She's smart enough to know when you're happy and when you're pretending to be fine. What are you saying? I'm saying maybe the person you should be worried about hurting is yourself, because if you keep this up, you're going to lose something real because you're too scared to believe it could last. Ryan wanted to argue, but the words stuck in his throat. Because Marcus was right. He'd been pulling away, finding excuses, creating distance. Not because Elena had done anything wrong, but because every day she stayed felt like borrowed time, and he was terrified of the debt coming due. That evening, Sophie called him out too. Are you mad at Elena? She asked during dinner, pushing her mac and cheese around her plate. What? No.
Why would you think that? Because she hasn't come over this week, and you've been quiet. You only get quiet like this when something's wrong. Nothing's wrong, Soph. Dad. Sophie gave him a look that was far too knowing for a 7-year-old. I'm not stupid. Ryan set down his fork and studied his daughter. When had she gotten so perceptive? When had she started reading him like an open book? I'm not mad at Elena, he said carefully. I'm just trying to figure some things out. What things? How did he explain adult fear to a child? How did he tell her that he was terrified of giving her hope and then watching it shatter? Complicated things, he said finally. Sophie was quiet for a moment, then said, I like her, Dad. I like when she comes over. She's funny and she listens to my ocean facts even though they're probably boring to grown-ups. They're not boring, and she makes you smile. The real smile, not the dad smile you do when you're trying to make me feel better about stuff. Ryan felt something crack inside his chest. The real smile? Yeah, the one that makes your eyes all crinkly. You used to do it more when I was little, but then you stopped. And now you do it again when Elena's around. Sophie looked at him seriously. I don't want you to stop smiling like that again. Later that night, after Sophie was asleep, Ryan sat on his balcony in the cold November air and made himself face the truth Marcus and Sophie had been trying to tell him. He was sabotaging this, not because Elena had given him any reason to doubt her, but because he'd spent 6 years building walls and he didn't know how to live without them. The walls had kept him safe, kept Sophie safe, but they'd also kept him isolated, going through the motions of life without really living it. Elena made him feel alive again, made him laugh and think and hope, and that terrified him more than anything. His phone rang. Elena's name on the screen. Ryan almost didn't answer, almost let it go to voicemail and continued his slow retreat into the safety of solitude. But then he thought about Sophie's words, about the real smile, about the kind of father he wanted to be. Not just protective, but brave enough to show his daughter that taking risks on people was worth it. He answered. Hey, Elena said, and he could hear the uncertainty in her voice. Is this a bad time? No, it's a good time. I feel like I haven't really talked to you all week. Like you're there but not there, you know? Ryan closed his eyes. I know. I'm sorry. Did I do something wrong? No, you've been perfect. That's actually the problem. There was a long pause, then Elena said quietly, Ryan, I need you to talk to me. Really talk to me. Because I can feel you pulling away and I don't know why. So Ryan talked. Sitting on his balcony in the cold, staring at the distant lights of the city, he told her everything. About his fear that she'd realize she could do better. About his terror that Sophie would get attached and then devastated. About the certainty that good things in his life always had an expiration date. I'm waiting for the other shoe to drop, he admitted. For you to wake up and realize that dating a single dad who barely makes ends meet isn't what you signed up for. And I keep thinking maybe if I pull back now, it'll hurt less when you leave.
Elena was quiet for so long that Ryan thought the call had dropped. "I'm still here," she said finally. "I'm just trying to figure out where to start." "You don't have to." "No, let me say this. First, I'm not going anywhere. I know you don't believe that yet, and I understand why.
But I need you to hear it anyway.
Second, you're not barely making ends meet. You're providing for your daughter, keeping a roof over her head, making sure she's safe and loved and educated. That's not failing. That's succeeding at the thing that matters most. Elena. Third, and this is important, so please listen. I'm not with you because I'm slumming it or looking for some authentic blue-collar experience. I'm with you because you're kind and honest and you make me laugh. Because you're an incredible father. Because when I'm with you, I don't have to be CEO Elena Ward. I can just be Elena, and I've been looking for that my whole life. Ryan felt his throat tighten. You make it sound so simple. It is simple. The fear makes it complicated. Her voice softened. Ryan, I'm scared too. I'm scared of screwing this up. I'm scared Sophie will decide she doesn't like me. I'm scared that one day you'll look at me and see someone from a different world who doesn't belong in yours. But I'm not letting that fear make my decisions. I'm choosing to stay and see what happens. What if it doesn't work? What if it does? The question hung in the cold air. Ryan thought about Sophie's smile when Elena walked through the door, about the way Elena fit into their Tuesday dinners like she'd always been there, about how much lighter he felt when he stopped trying to control everything. I don't know how to do this, Ryan said. Let someone in without keeping one foot out the door. Then we'll figure it out together. Both feet in, both of us terrified, both of us trying anyway. Elena paused. But I need to know you're actually willing to try. Because I can handle fear and uncertainty and all the messy stuff. What I can't handle is you making decisions for both of us because you've already decided how this story ends. She was right. He'd been writing the ending before they'd even gotten through the middle chapters, casting Elena as someone who would inevitably leave because that's what people did. But Elena wasn't people. She was someone specific, someone who'd shown up again and again, who'd won over his daughter and his friends, and even the cynical, self-protective parts of himself he thought were permanent. Okay, Ryan said. Okay? Okay, both feet in. Both of us terrified. Both of us trying. He took a breath. I'm sorry for pulling away. I'm sorry for making you doubt whether you did something wrong when you've been nothing but amazing. Thank you for saying that. Can I see you tomorrow? Like, actually see you? Not me being weird and distant? I'd really like that. They made plans for lunch the next day, just the two of them. When Ryan hung up, he felt lighter somehow, like he'd been carrying a weight he hadn't realized was there and had finally set it down. The next afternoon, Ryan met Elena at a small Vietnamese restaurant she loved in the International District. She was already there when he arrived, sitting at a corner table and looking nervous in a way that made him realize how much his pulling away had affected her. Hi, he said, sliding into the seat across from her. Hi. For a moment, they just looked at each other. Then Ryan reached across the table and took her hand. I'm all in, he said. I'm going to screw up sometimes because I've spent a long time not trusting good things. But I'm all in. Elena's smile was like sunrise. Yeah? Yeah, both feet, terrified as hell. But I want this. I want you. And I want to stop acting like you're going to disappear just because I'm scared. That's all I needed to hear. They ordered food and talked like they used to before Ryan had started building walls again. Elena told him about a disastrous board meeting where one of her investors had suggested they pivot to cryptocurrency, which Elena had politely but firmly shut down. He looked at me like I'd personally insulted him, Elena said, laughing, and then spent 20 minutes explaining blockchain like I'm an idiot who doesn't understand technology. How did you not lose it? I smiled and nodded until he was done, then explained why it was a terrible idea using small words he could understand. My CFO said it was the most professional passive-aggressive thing she'd ever witnessed. Ryan laughed, and Elena squeezed his hand. There it is, she said. What? The real smile. Sophie told me about that. Said you have a dad smile and a real smile, and I needed to make sure I saw the real one more often. She said that to you? Last week, when you were pulling away and I came over anyway. She pulled me aside and gave me a very serious talk about how you sometimes need people to stick around even when you're being weird. Elena's expression was fond.
Your daughter is remarkably emotionally intelligent. She's been through enough to know how people work, I guess. She's been through enough to know that some people stay. And she's decided I'm one of them. Elena met his eyes. She's not wrong. Over the next few weeks, Ryan made a conscious effort to stop waiting for disaster. He answered Elena's texts promptly. He made plans and didn't cancel them.
He let himself enjoy the way Sophie lit up when Elena arrived for Tuesday dinner, the way Elena remembered to bring ingredients for Sophie's school project without being asked, the way the three of them had developed their own rhythms and inside jokes. One Saturday, Elena suggested they go to the aquarium. Sophie nearly vibrated out of her skin with excitement.
The aquarium? Really? Can we see the octopus and the jellyfish? Miss Chen said they have a tide pool where you can touch sea stars.
We can see everything, Elena promised. So they went, and it was one of those perfect days that felt almost cinematic in its simple joy. Sophie dragged them from exhibit to exhibit, spouting facts about marine life with the confidence of a tiny marine biologist. Elena listened to all of it, asking questions and taking pictures of Sophie pressed against the glass, watching fish swim by. At the tide pool, a volunteer showed Sophie how to gently touch a sea star, and her expression of wonder made Ryan's chest ache.
Dad! Elena! Look, I'm touching it!
That's amazing, Soph, Ryan called back. Elena stood beside him, her hand finding his.
She's so happy.
Yeah, she is.
You are too.
Ryan looked at her, really looked at her. This woman who'd come into his life at a networking event and somehow become essential, who'd won over his daughter and his friends and every defense mechanism he'd built. I am, he said, and meant it completely. Later, in the gift shop, Sophie found a stuffed giant Pacific octopus that she absolutely had to have.
Please, Dad, I'll use my allowance.
That thing costs $40, Soph. I have 37 saved up. I can do extra chores for the rest. Elena caught Ryan's eye and pulled out her wallet before he could stop her. How about an early Christmas present?
Elena, you don't have to. I want to. Besides, I need someone to explain octopus facts to me, and I feel like this guy will help facilitate that.
Sophie hugged the octopus, which she immediately named Dr. Tentacles, and hugged Elena's legs for good measure.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
On the drive home, Sophie fell asleep in the back seat, Dr. Tentacles clutched to her chest.
Ryan glanced at her in the rearview mirror, then at Elena in the passenger seat.
Thank you, he said quietly, for today, for everything. You don't have to thank me. I had fun. No, I mean it. Thank you for sticking around even when I was being an idiot. Thank you for not giving up when I was pushing you away. Thank you for loving my daughter. Elena turned to look at him, her expression serious. Ryan, I do love her. I know it's soon and maybe I'm not supposed to say it yet, but I do. She's funny and smart and brave, and she deserves every good thing. She deserves you. I think we all deserve each other. They got back to Ryan's apartment and carried a still sleeping Sophie inside. Ryan laid her in bed, Dr. Tentacles tucked beside her, and brushed the hair off her forehead. Elena stood in the doorway, watching with soft eyes. In the living room, Ryan made tea while Elena curled up on his couch like she belonged there. Because she did belong there. That was the truth he'd been running from. Not that she would leave, but that she'd stayed. That she'd carved out a space in their lives and filled it with laughter and patience and love. I'm glad you didn't give up on me, Ryan said, handing her a mug. I wasn't going to. I told you. I don't disappear. I know, and I'm starting to actually believe it. Elena smiled and pulled him down beside her. They sat in comfortable silence, drinking tea and listening to the quiet sounds of the apartment. Outside, rain started to fall, the first real rain they'd had in weeks. Ryan thought about how much had changed in 2 months, how the carefully controlled life he'd built had been disrupted in the best possible way, how Sophie was happier, lighter, more willing to take risks on people, how he felt like himself again, not just Sophie's dad or the mechanic or the guy doing his best to survive, but Ryan, a person with hopes and fears and the capacity for love he'd thought he'd lost. Stay tonight? He asked. Elena looked at him with surprise. She'd never stayed over when Sophie was there, both of them agreeing to take that step slowly. Are you sure? I'm sure. I want to wake up with you here. I want Sophie to see that this is real and solid and not something I'm keeping separate from the rest of my life.
Okay, Elena said softly. I'll stay. That night, lying in bed with Elena beside him, Ryan felt something he hadn't felt in 6 years. Peace. Not the absence of fear, but the presence of something stronger. Trust. Hope. The belief that maybe, just maybe, some good things did last. He was almost asleep when Elena whispered, "Ryan? I love you too, just so you know."
Ryan turned to face her in the darkness. I didn't say it. You didn't have to. It was in every word today, every look. She touched his face gently. But I wanted you to hear it anyway. I love you, Ryan said, and the words felt like jumping off a cliff and discovering he could fly. I'm terrified and I love you, and I don't know how to do this, but I want to try. That's all we need. Both of us. Terrified, trying together. They fell asleep tangled together, and when Ryan woke up to Sophie's voice saying, "Dad, why is Elena here?" He didn't panic. He just smiled. "Because she stayed over. Is that okay?" Sophie considered this, still holding Dr. Tentacles. "Is she staying for breakfast?" "If she wants to." "I want to," Elena said, sitting up and somehow looking beautiful despite bedhead and no makeup. "What are we making?" "Pancakes," Sophie decided. "The chocolate chip kind." So they made pancakes, the three of them crowded in Ryan's small kitchen, and when Elena flipped one directly onto the floor, and Sophie laughed so hard she got hiccups, Ryan knew with absolute certainty that this was exactly where he was supposed to be. The fear was still there. It probably always would be, but it didn't get to make the decisions anymore. Love did. The pancake breakfast became a Sunday tradition. Over the next month, Elena started keeping a toothbrush at Ryan's apartment, then a change of clothes, then half a drawer in his dresser that Sophie had enthusiastically cleared out by dumping Ryan's socks onto the floor. The integration happened so naturally that Ryan barely noticed it until one evening when he reached for the coffee mugs and realized one of them was Elena's. A blue ceramic thing with a chipped handle that she refused to replace because her nephew had given it to her. "When did that get here?" he asked, holding it up. Elena looked up from where she was helping Sophie with fractions at the kitchen table. 2 weeks ago? I kept forgetting to bring coffee to work, so I left one here." "Huh. Is that okay?" Ryan studied the mug, this small piece of evidence that Elena had woven herself into their daily life. "Yeah, it's okay. More than okay, actually. It was right. But rightness didn't mean easy. December brought complications Ryan hadn't fully prepared for. Elena's work schedule intensified as her company prepared for end-of-year reviews and a major investor presentation. She started canceling Tuesday dinners, showing up late for plans, answering emails during conversations. "I'm sorry," she said one evening, typing on her phone while Ryan cooked and Sophie did homework. "I just need to respond to this one thing." "You said that 20 minutes ago," Sophie pointed out, not looking up from her math problems. "I know. I'm sorry, sweetheart. Work is just crazy right now." Sophie shrugged, but Ryan saw the disappointment she was trying to hide. The same disappointment he felt but couldn't quite articulate, because he understood that Elena had responsibilities beyond them. She ran a company. She had 300 employees depending on her. She couldn't just turn that off because Ryan wanted her undivided attention, but understanding didn't make it less frustrating. The following Tuesday, Elena didn't show up at all. Ryan kept dinner warm, checking his phone every few minutes, while Sophie set the table for 3 and pretended not to notice that the third chair stayed empty. At 7:30, Elena finally called. "I'm so sorry," she said, and Ryan could hear the exhaustion in her voice. "We had an emergency meeting that ran over, and then there was a crisis with one of our hospital clients, and I just now got free. It's fine. It's not fine. I promised I'd be there." "Elena, you have a job. I get it." "Do you?" She sounded almost desperate. "Because I feel like I'm failing at everything right now. Work is insane, and I keep letting you and Sophie down, and I don't know how to balance it all." Ryan wanted to say something comforting, something that would make her feel better, but Sophie was watching him from the table, and he could see her trying to decode the conversation from his half of it. "We can talk about this later," Ryan said. "Just get some sleep, okay?" "Okay, tell Sophie I'm sorry." After he hung up, Sophie asked, "Is she coming?" "Not tonight, work stuff." Sophie nodded and started eating without another word, but Ryan noticed she'd already moved Elena's place setting back to the cabinet. That night, after Sophie went to bed, Ryan sat on his balcony despite the freezing rain and tried to sort through the tangle of emotions in his chest. He wasn't angry, exactly. Elena had warned him that her job was demanding. She'd been honest about her tendency to overwork. But knowing something intellectually and experiencing it emotionally were different things. The thing that bothered him most wasn't even Elena's absence. It was Sophie's quiet acceptance of it. The way she'd shrugged it off like she'd expected the disappointment all along. Like she was already protecting herself from caring too much. His phone buzzed. Marcus. Jessica told me to call you, Marcus said without preamble. She said you have that look. What look? The look you get when you're about to do something stupid and self-destructive. I don't have a look. You absolutely have a look. Talk to me. So Ryan talked about Elena's increasing absences, about Sophie's quiet disappointment, about the feeling that maybe he'd been right to be scared, that maybe this was exactly what he'd been afraid of, Elena getting pulled back into her world and leaving them on the periphery. Here's the thing, Marcus said when Ryan finished. You're doing it again. Doing what? Writing the ending before the story's done. Elena missed one dinner because of a work emergency. That's not abandonment. That's life. It's not just one dinner. It's been weeks of her being distracted and stressed and not really present. Okay, so tell her that. Use your words like a grown-up instead of spiraling in your head and pushing her away. I'm not pushing her away. Yet. But you're thinking about it. I can hear it in your voice. Ryan was quiet, staring at the rain-soaked city lights. Look, Marcus continued, his voice gentler. Nobody's saying you don't have legitimate concerns, but Elena's been straight with you from the beginning. She told you her job was demanding. She told you she wasn't always good at balance. If that's a deal breaker, then you need to figure that out. But don't sabotage this because you're scared. Talk to her. Be honest. Give her a chance to meet you halfway. After they hung up, Ryan sat in the cold for another hour, forcing himself to be honest about what he actually felt versus what his fear was telling him to feel. The truth was, he missed Elena. He missed the version of their relationship where she was present and engaged and not constantly checking her phone. But the other truth was that he'd fallen for someone who ran a company, and expecting her to suddenly have unlimited free time was neither fair nor realistic. The question was whether they could find a middle ground that worked for both of them. Ryan texted Elena, "Can we talk tomorrow? In person?" The response came immediately. "Yes, I'll make time. I promise." They met for lunch at a quiet cafe near Elena's office. She looked exhausted, dark circles under her eyes, hair pulled into a messy bun, wearing what Ryan had learned was her stress outfit, all black, minimal jewelry, the armor of a CEO in crisis mode. "Thank you for meeting me," Elena said, wrapped around a cup of coffee like it was a life preserver. "Of course." Ryan took a breath. "We need to talk about what's been happening." "I know. I've been a terrible girlfriend lately." "You haven't been terrible. You've been busy. There's a difference." Elena shook her head. "Busy is an excuse. I've been prioritizing work over you and Sophie, and that's not okay." "Your work is important. I get that." But Ryan struggled to find the right words. "I need you to understand what it looks like from Sophie's perspective. Her mom left. Everyone she's ever gotten attached to has eventually chosen something else over her. And when you start canceling plans and showing up distracted, it confirms her worst fear, that she's not enough to make people stay." Elena's face crumpled. "Ryan, I never meant—" "I know you didn't, but impact matters more than intention, especially with kids." He reached across the table and took her hand. "I'm not saying this to make you feel guilty. I'm saying it because if we're going to make this work, we need to figure out how to balance your job with our relationship. And I don't know what that looks like." "Neither do I," Elena admitted. "I've never had to balance before. It was always just work all the time. And now I have you and Sophie, and I want to be present for you, but I also can't just abandon my responsibilities. I'm not asking you to abandon anything. I'm asking you to help me understand what we can realistically expect from each other." They talked for over an hour, mapping out boundaries and expectations. Elena admitted that she'd been using work as a crutch when she felt overwhelmed by the relationship, diving into problems she knew how to solve instead of sitting with the uncomfortable vulnerability of being in love.
Ryan admitted that he'd been letting fear color his perception, seeing abandonment in normal work stress. What if we set actual boundaries? Elena suggested. Like, Tuesday dinners are sacred unless there's a genuine emergency.
And I don't check my phone when I'm with you and Sophie. And in exchange, you tell me when you're feeling neglected instead of letting it build up. That sounds reasonable. And maybe I need to be better about setting boundaries at work too. I have a whole executive team. I don't need to be involved in every single decision. Elena squeezed his hand. You and Sophie matter more than any business deal. I need to start acting like it. I don't want you to resent us for holding you back. You're not holding me back. You're giving me a reason to have an actual life instead of just a career. She smiled sadly. Before I met you, I worked 90-hour weeks and told myself it was because I was dedicated. But really, I just didn't have anything else to go home to. Now I do. And I don't want to lose it. They left the cafe with a plan and a renewed commitment to communicate better. Ryan felt cautiously optimistic. They'd had their first real relationship conversation, and instead of falling apart, they'd found their way through it. But the universe had a way of testing commitments. The next week, Elena's biggest investor demanded an emergency presentation about the company's 5-year strategy. It meant 3 days in San Francisco, leaving immediately. I have to go, Elena said on the phone, already sounding guilty. I'm so sorry. I know we just talked about boundaries, but this is non-negotiable. I understand. Do you? Because I feel like I'm already breaking our agreement. Elena, this is your company. Go. Do what you need to do. We'll be here when you get back. Ryan, I mean it. This is important. Just call Sophie before bed if you can. Let her know you're thinking about her. I will, I promise. Elena called every night, video chatting with Sophie about school and ocean facts and Dr. Tentacles' latest adventures. Sophie always acted casual about it, but Ryan noticed she had the stuffed octopus ready beside her each time Elena's call came through. On the third night, Sophie asked, "When's Elena coming back?" "Tomorrow evening." "Good. I miss her." It was the first time Sophie had admitted it out loud. Ryan pulled her into a hug, feeling the weight of his daughter's trust in his chest. She was letting herself care about Elena, opening herself up to the possibility of being hurt, and Ryan realized he had to do the same. Elena returned from San Francisco exhausted but triumphant. The investor had been impressed with the presentation. The company was positioned for major growth. It was everything she'd worked for. I missed you, she said, collapsing onto Ryan's couch while Sophie showed her the drawing she'd made of the Mariana Trench. We missed you too. Look, Elena, this is the deepest part of the ocean. It's so deep that the pressure would crush a human instantly. Isn't that cool? That's extremely cool and also terrifying, Elena said, studying the drawing seriously. Is that an anglerfish? Yes, with the light on its head to see in the dark. Ryan watched them together. Sophie animated and excited, Elena engaged despite her obvious exhaustion, and felt the fear in his chest loosen its grip slightly. This was working. Imperfectly, messily, but working. December continued its march toward the holidays, bringing new complications. Sophie's school announced a holiday concert and family dinner, and Sophie immediately assumed Elena would come. You'll come, right? Sophie asked Elena during one of their Tuesday dinners. Elena glanced at Ryan, uncertain. They hadn't talked about holiday events, about what it meant for Elena to participate in these family-oriented activities. If your dad says it's okay, Elena said carefully. Dad? Sophie looked at him expectantly. Ryan knew what this was. Another step forward, another public declaration that Elena was part of their lives. The kind of step that would be noticed by other parents, by teachers, by everyone who knew their small family unit. Of course she can come, Ryan said, and watched Sophie's face light up. The concert was scheduled for the week before Christmas. Ryan, Elena, and Sophie arrived early, finding seats in the decorated cafeteria that smelled like pine and sugar cookies. Other families filled in around them, and Ryan felt the curious glances from parents who knew him as the single dad mechanic, now showing up with a woman who was clearly more than just a friend. Jessica and Marcus were there with Emma, and Jessica hugged Elena like they were old friends. I'm so glad you came, Jessica said. Emma's been telling me all about how Sophie talks about you at school. Good things, I hope, Elena said, smiling. The best things. You're apparently very smart and very pretty and also rich, which Sophie thinks is impressive, but not as impressive as your knowledge of octopuses." Elena laughed, and Ryan felt a rush of gratitude for Jessica's easy acceptance. The concert itself was chaotic and beautiful in the way elementary school performances always were. Kids forgot lyrics, someone's costume fell off, and the accompanist played the wrong song for a full 30 seconds before realizing her mistake. But when Sophie's class performed their piece, a song about winter in different languages, Ryan felt his chest swell with pride. Elena's hand found his, squeezing gently. Afterward, during the family dinner portion, they sat at a long table with other families. Sophie introduced Elena to her friends with casual confidence that suggested this was completely normal, that Elena had always been part of their family structure. "This is Elena. She's my dad's girlfriend. She works with computers and knows everything about sea creatures." "Not everything," Elena corrected, grinning, "but I'm learning." One of the other moms, a woman Ryan recognized but had never really talked to, leaned over. "You two make a lovely couple," she said. "It's nice to see Ryan happy. He's been alone so long." "Thank you," Elena said graciously, while Ryan tried not to feel weird about being discussed like he wasn't sitting right there. The evening felt like another milestone, another brick in the foundation they were building. And when they got home and tucked Sophie into bed, she asked the question that had clearly been on her mind all night. "Is Elena going to spend Christmas with us?" Ryan looked at Elena, who looked back at him with uncertainty and hope in equal measure. "Do you want her to?" Ryan asked. "Yes, obviously, because otherwise it's just us, and that's fine, but it would be better with Elena." "Let me talk to Elena about it, okay? We'll figure something out." After Sophie fell asleep, Ryan and Elena sat on the couch in the dark, the only light coming from the small Christmas tree Ryan had set up in the corner. Sophie had insisted on decorating it with handmade ornaments, so it was covered in popsicle stick creations and glitter glue disasters. "So?" Elena said. "Christmas. Yeah, Christmas. I was planning to visit my parents in Portland, but I could change that, or maybe you and Sophie could come with me." Ryan's stomach clenched at the thought of meeting her parents, of being thrust into that world where he'd be measured and found wanting. "Or," Elena continued, reading his expression, "I could visit them on Christmas Eve and come back Christmas Day. Spend the evening with you and Sophie. You don't have to rearrange your whole holiday for us. I want to. My parents will understand. And honestly, spending Christmas in my childhood home answering questions about why I'm not married yet sounds exhausting. I'd rather be here. Sophie would love that. So would I." They made plans. Elena would leave early Christmas Eve morning, spend the day with her parents, and drive back that night. Christmas Day would be the three of them. "Are you sure?" Ryan asked. "Your parents won't mind?" "They'll survive. Besides, my mom's been asking about you. I think she wants to meet the mechanic who made me use words like boyfriend and relationship without irony." "You've told them about me?" "Of course. You're kind of a big deal in my life, Ryan Mercer." He kissed her, soft and slow, trying to pour all his gratitude and affection into it. When they broke apart, Elena was smiling. "I love you," she said. "In case you forgot." "I didn't forget. I love you too." The week before Christmas, Ryan found himself in an unfamiliar position, shopping for a gift for Elena. What did you get someone who could buy literally anything she wanted? Who ran a successful company and owned a condo worth more than Ryan would make in a lifetime? He enlisted Sophie's help, and together they wandered through stores, rejecting option after option. "What about jewelry?" Sophie suggested. "She has jewelry." "Clothes? Too risky. I don't know her size." "A book?" "Maybe. What kind of book?" They ended up in a small bookstore in Fremont, browsing shelves while Sophie peppered him with questions. "What does she like to read?" "I don't know. We haven't really talked about it." "Dad, you're dating her. How do you not know what she reads?" "We talk about other things." "You're bad at this." She wasn't wrong. Ryan realized with some embarrassment that despite 3 months of dating, there were whole areas of Elena's life he knew nothing about. Her reading preferences, her favorite music, whether she preferred coffee or tea in the morning. He knew the big things, her job, her fears, her dreams, but the small details that made up a person's daily life were still mysterious. "Maybe that's the gift,"
Ryan said slowly, learning more about her, paying attention to the small stuff. Sophie looked skeptical. That's not a gift. That's just being a good boyfriend. Smart kid. They left the bookstore empty-handed, but with a new plan.
For the next few days, Ryan paid attention. He noticed that Elena hummed when she cooked, always the same song, something she must have learned as a kid. He noticed that she took her coffee with a specific amount of cream, measured precisely. He noticed that she had a habit of running her fingers along book spines when she walked past shelves, like she was greeting old friends. And he noticed that in Elena's car, there was a worn paperback copy of a novel by an author Ryan had never heard of. Some mystery series that Elena mentioned reading in college. I used to read these when I was stressed, she told him when he asked about it. The main character is a detective who solves impossible cases using logic and observation. I loved how everything made sense by the end, how all the clues fit together perfectly. Do you still read them? Not really. I don't have time anymore, but I keep that one in my car because, I don't know. It reminds me of when my life was simpler. That conversation led Ryan to a small used bookstore where he found the entire series. 12 books total, some out of print, all in decent condition. He bought every one and had them wrapped together. For Sophie's gift to Elena, they made a photo album. Pictures from the aquarium, from Tuesday dinners, from the holiday concert. Sophie decorated each page with stickers and drawings, adding captions in her careful handwriting. This one says, "Elena teaching me fractions," Sophie explained, pointing to a photo Ryan had taken of them at the kitchen table. And this one says, "Best Octopus Facts Listener." She's gonna love it, Ryan said, and meant it. Christmas Eve arrived with unexpected snow, rare for Seattle, and Sophie was beside herself with excitement. They built a snowman in the small courtyard of their apartment complex before Elena had to leave for Portland. "Drive safe," Ryan said, kissing her goodbye while Sophie added stick arms to their snowman. "I will. I'll text when I get there." "And you'll be back tonight?" "Late, but yes, I'll be here for Christmas morning." Elena knelt down to hug Sophie. "Be good for your dad, okay?" "I'm always good." "That's debatable," Ryan said. After Elena left, Ryan and Sophie spent the evening watching Christmas movies and making cookies that were slightly burned but tasted fine anyway. Sophie fell asleep on the couch halfway through the third movie, and Ryan carried her to bed, tucking Dr. Tentacles beside her. His phone buzzed. Elena, texting from her parents' house. Made it safely. Family dinner was interesting. "My mom asked 50 questions about you. My dad wanted to know what kind of car you drive." Ryan smiled and texted back, "What did you tell them?" "That you drive a truck, you rebuilt yourself, and you're the best person I've ever met. You're going to give them unrealistic expectations." "Too late. They already have those. Mom wants to meet you. Fair warning, terrifying. But okay." "How's Sophie?" "Asleep on the couch. We made cookies and watched movies, and she's completely sugared out. Perfect Christmas Eve. I wish I was there." "You will be soon. Drive safe when you head back." "I will. I love you. Love you too." Ryan fell asleep on the couch, waiting for Elena to text that she was heading back. He woke up to his phone ringing, Elena's name on the screen, but it was nearly 1 a.m., hours later than she should have been starting the drive. "Hey," he answered, still groggy. "You leaving now?" "Ryan." Elena's voice was tight, stressed. "I'm still in Portland. The roads are really bad. They're saying not to drive unless it's an emergency. There was an accident on I-5 and they've closed the highway." Ryan sat up, suddenly fully awake. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine. I'm safe at my parents' house. But Ryan, I don't think I can get back tonight. The highway might not open until late tomorrow. I'm so sorry." "Don't apologize. You can't control the weather." "But Sophie, it's Christmas morning. I promised I'd be there." Ryan heard the devastation in her voice and felt it mirror in his own chest. Not for himself, but for Sophie. For the disappointment she'd feel when she woke up to find Elena hadn't made it back. "We'll figure it out," Ryan said, trying to sound more confident than he felt. "The important thing is that you're safe. I'm going to try to leave as early as possible tomorrow, the second they open the highway. Elena, don't drive if it's not safe." "I have to. I promised Sophie, I promised both of you." She was crying now. Ryan could hear it. "I'm supposed to be there. This was supposed to be our first Christmas together. And it will be." Just maybe not exactly when we planned. They talked for another hour, Elena apologizing over and over, Ryan reassuring her that it was okay, even though his heart ached thinking about Sophie's face when she realized Elena wasn't there. Eventually, Elena's exhaustion won, and they hung up with promises to text in the morning. Ryan sat in the dark living room, staring at the sad little Christmas tree with its homemade ornaments, and tried to figure out how to break the news to Sophie in a way that wouldn't shatter her fragile trust in people staying. Christmas morning arrived gray and cold, the snow from the previous day already turning to slush. Sophie bounded out of her room at 6 a.m., Dr. Tentacles under one arm, heading straight for the tree. "Is Elena here yet?" she called out. Ryan emerged from his bedroom, bracing himself. "Sophie, come sit with me for a minute." She froze, her expression shifting from excitement to wariness in an instant. "What's wrong?" "Elena's okay," Ryan said quickly. "But she got stuck in Portland. The highway closed because of weather, and she can't get back yet." Sophie's face went carefully blank, the expression Ryan hated most because it meant she was protecting herself. "Oh, she's going to try to get here as soon as the roads open. She wanted to be here. She really did." "It's okay." Sophie's voice was small. "It's just weather. Not her fault." "Sophie, can we open presents now?" Ryan wanted to push to make sure she understood this wasn't abandonment, just bad timing, but he also knew his daughter well enough to recognize when she needed space to process. "Yeah," he said. "Let's open presents." They went through their modest pile of gifts. Sophie loved everything: new books, art supplies, a science kit about ocean ecosystems. She thanked Ryan with appropriate enthusiasm, but he could see the distraction in her eyes, the part of her that was listening for the door. Around 9 a.m., Ryan's phone rang. "Elena." "The highway just opened," she said without preamble. "I'm leaving now. I'll be there in 3 hours, maybe less." "Elena, the roads might still be bad. I'm coming. I promise Sophie, and I'm coming." She hung up before Ryan could argue further. He told Sophie, watching hope and fear war on her face. "She's really coming? She's really coming." The wait was excruciating. Ryan tried to distract Sophie with breakfast and a movie, but every few minutes she'd check the window, watching for Elena's car. Ryan checked his phone obsessively, tracking the drive through periodic texts. "Just past Olympia. Roads are okay. Hour and a half out. Traffic is slow but moving. 45 minutes. Tell Sophie I'm sorry." At noon, Elena's Audi pulled into the parking lot. Sophie saw it first and bolted for the door, Ryan right behind her. They met Elena in the hallway, and Sophie crashed into her with enough force to nearly knock her over. "You came," Sophie said into Elena's coat. "You really came." "Of course I came." Elena was crying, holding Sophie tight. "I promised, didn't I? I don't break promises." They went inside, and Elena apologized about 50 more times before Sophie finally told her to stop. "You're here now. That's what matters." They had their Christmas together, hours late but no less meaningful. Elena loved the books Ryan had found, tearing up when she saw the complete collection. "How did you know?" she asked. "I paid attention." Sophie's photo album made Elena cry harder, especially the page labeled Family that showed the three of them at the aquarium, Sophie between them, all of them smiling. "Family," Elena repeated softly, looking at Ryan. "Is that what we are?" Ryan looked at his daughter, who was watching them both with those two knowing eyes. Looked at Elena, exhausted from driving through bad weather because she'd made a promise to a 7-year-old. Looked at the life they'd built together in 4 months, messy and imperfect and absolutely real. "Yeah," he said. "I think that's exactly what we are." Sophie climbed onto the couch between them, Dr. Tentacles in hand, and they spent the rest of Christmas Day in that small apartment, eating leftovers and watching movies and being exactly what they'd become, a family. Not perfect, not without complications, but real and solid and absolutely worth every risk Ryan had taken to get here. The weeks after Christmas brought a kind of peace Ryan hadn't known he was missing. Elena started spending more nights at the apartment, her presence becoming so natural that Sophie stopped commenting on it. The blue coffee mug multiplied into a full set of dishes. Elena's laptop found a permanent spot on the kitchen counter. Her shampoo appeared in the shower, smelling like lavender, and something Ryan couldn't quite name but had come to associate with home. January brought rain and routine. Sophie returned to school with stories about her winter break that apparently featured Elena prominently because her teacher pulled Ryan aside one afternoon during pickup. Sophie talks about Elena a lot, Ms. Rodriguez said carefully. She seems very happy. Ryan felt the old defensiveness rise in his chest, the instinct to protect Sophie from judgment or prying questions. But Ms. Rodriguez's expression was kind, not nosy. She is happy, Ryan said. We both are. Good. She deserves that. You both do. Miss Rodriguez smiled. Sophie's really blossomed this year, more confident, more willing to take social risks. Whatever you're doing, it's working. The comment stayed with Ryan as he drove Sophie home. He glanced at her in the rearview mirror, chattering about a project on deep-sea bioluminescence, and realized she had changed. The anxious, guarded girl who'd asked Elena if she was going to disappear had been replaced by someone lighter, braver, more willing to trust. "Dad?" Sophie said, interrupting his thoughts. "Can I ask you something?" "Always." "Is Elena going to move in with us?" Ryan nearly swerved. "What?" "She's here all the time anyway, and she has stuff here. So I was just wondering if she's going to officially move in." We haven't talked about that." "Why not?" "Because that's a big decision, Soph. It's not something you just do without thinking about it carefully." Sophie considered this. "Do you want her to move in?" Did he? Ryan hadn't let himself think that far ahead, too focused on taking things day by day to consider major steps like cohabitation. But now that Sophie had said it out loud, he realized the answer was obvious. "Yeah," he admitted. "I think I do." "Then you should ask her." "It's more complicated than that." "Why?" "You love her. She loves us. She's already here most of the time. What's complicated?" Out of the mouths of babes. That evening, after Sophie went to bed, Ryan brought it up to Elena. She was sitting on his couch in sweatpants and one of his old t-shirts, looking more beautiful than she had any right to while eating ice cream straight from the container. "Sophie asked if you're moving in," Ryan said, sitting beside her. Elena's spoon stopped halfway to her mouth. "She did?" "Yeah, and I realized we haven't really talked about what this is, where it's going. What do you want it to be?" Ryan took the ice cream container from her hands and set it on the coffee table, giving himself time to organize his thoughts. "I want you here. Officially. Not just staying over sometimes, but actually living here. With us. As a family." Elena's eyes widened. "Ryan, I know my apartment is small and your place is amazing. I know it doesn't make logical sense for you to downgrade, but I want to wake up with you every morning. I want Sophie to have you here, not just as a visitor, but as someone who lives here, who belongs here." He took her hands. "I want us to be a real family. Not just dating, not just seeing how things go, but committed, permanent." "You're sure?" Elena's voice was shaky. "Because that's a big step. And I come with complications. My job, my schedule, I know. And we'll figure it out together, like we've been doing." Ryan squeezed her hands. "I'm done being scared of what might go wrong. I want to focus on what's going right." Elena kissed him, and when she pulled back, she was crying and smiling at the same time. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I'll move in. I want that too, all of it." They told Sophie the next morning over breakfast, and her shriek of excitement probably woke up half the building. "Really? Elena's really moving in?" "Really," Elena confirmed. "If that's okay with you." "It's so okay. Can we turn the spare storage closet into a reading nook? And can Elena keep all her fancy work clothes here? And can we get a bigger couch so we all fit better?" Ryan laughed. "We'll figure all of that out." But the logistics proved more complicated than anticipated. Elena's lease didn't end for another 3 months, and even then, the apartment was too small for 3 people and all their belongings, which led to a conversation Ryan had been avoiding. "We need a bigger place," Elena said one evening, surrounded by moving boxes she'd started packing anyway. "This apartment is perfect for you and Sophie, but 3 people? I can't afford anything bigger, not in Seattle." "I can." Ryan's jaw tightened. "Elena, before you get all proud and stubborn on me, just listen." She came to sit beside him. "I'm not trying to control anything or make you feel less than.
But I have resources, and we're building a life together, and it makes sense to pool those resources. I want a place that's ours, not yours or mine, where Sophie has her own room and you have a garage space for projects, and I have an office for when I work from home. I can't let you buy us a house, Elena. Why not? Because of some outdated idea about men being providers? She raised an eyebrow. You provide in a million ways that have nothing to do with money. You're an amazing father. You cook meals every night. You make Sophie feel safe and loved. You've given me a family I didn't know I needed. Why can't I contribute financially to the space where we build that family? Because it feels like charity. It's not charity, it's partnership. Elena took his hands. Ryan, I make more money than I could spend in 3 lifetimes. It's just sitting there, accumulating interest. I'd much rather use it to build something real with you and Sophie. Please let me do this. Ryan wanted to argue to hold on to his pride and independence, but he also knew Elena was right. They were partners, and partnership meant accepting help when it was offered, even when it bruised his ego. Okay, he said finally, but I pay for groceries and utilities, and I handle all the repairs and maintenance. Deal. They started house hunting in February, dragging Sophie to showings every weekend. Most places were either too small or too expensive, or in neighborhoods that felt wrong. Sophie had strong opinions about everything. This one smells like old soup, she pronounced at a townhouse in Ballard. The backyard is too small for a garden, she declared at a house in West Seattle. The kitchen is ugly. Elena can't cook in an ugly kitchen. I can barely cook in any kitchen, Elena pointed out. Still, standards. The house they finally found was in Greenwood, a 3-bedroom craftsman with a small yard, a garage that made Ryan's heart sing, and a built-in bookshelf in the living room that Sophie immediately claimed for her marine biology books. It needed work, which Ryan loved because it gave him projects. The kitchen was outdated but functional. The neighborhood was quiet, with good schools and a park within walking distance. What do you think? Elena asked as they stood in the empty living room. Ryan looked around at the space that could become theirs. Imagined Sophie's art on the walls, Elena's blue coffee mug in the kitchen, family dinners at a table big enough for all of them. I think it's perfect, he said. Sophie ran through the rooms shouting about which one would be hers and where they could put the Christmas tree next year, and Ryan felt something settle in his chest. Not fear, not anxiety, but certainty. This was right. This was home. The move happened in early March, coordinated chaos that involved Marcus and Jessica helping pack, Sophie insisting on personally carrying Dr. Tentacles to the new house, and Elena hiring professional movers despite Ryan's protests. I'm not watching you carry furniture upstairs at your age, she said. I'm 32, not 60. Exactly. Protect your back now so you can still move when you're 60. The first night in the new house, they ordered pizza and ate it sitting on the floor because the furniture wasn't fully arranged yet. Sophie fell asleep between them, exhausted from the excitement, and Ryan carried her to her new bedroom, freshly painted ocean blue at her request. She's out, he said, returning to find Elena still on the living room floor, surrounded by boxes. Come here. Elena patted the space beside her, and Ryan sat down, pulling her against his chest. They sat in silence, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of their new home, the heater clicking on, the neighbor's dog barking, the wind in the trees outside. Are you happy? Elena asked. Yeah. Are you? Happier than I've ever been. She turned to look at him. Thank you for letting me be part of this, part of your family. Thank you for fighting to be part of it, for not giving up when I was scared and stupid. You were never stupid, just careful. And that's not a bad thing. Ryan kissed the top of her head, breathing in that lavender scent that meant home now. I love you. I love you too. They spent the next few weeks settling in, establishing new routines and new spaces. Sophie decorated her room with posters of marine life and insisted on having a world map on her wall to track ocean currents. Elena set up an office in the 3rd bedroom, filling it with the things she needed to work from home more often. Ryan claimed the garage, already planning the projects he could tackle. Tuesday dinners continued, now in a kitchen where they could all cook together without bumping into each other. Sophie's friends started coming over for playdates, and Ryan would hear her showing them around with pride. This is our house. Elena and my dad and me live here together, and that's Dr. Tentacles. He's very important.
In April, Elena's parents came to visit. Ryan had been dreading it for weeks, imagining all the ways he'd be judged and found wanting by these people from Elena's world. But Charles and Margaret Ward turned out to be surprisingly down to earth, more interested in Sophie than in interrogating Ryan. Elena tells us you're quite the mechanic, Charles said during dinner, which Ryan had stressed over making perfect. I do my best, sir. None of this sir business. Call me Charles. He smiled warmly. And I hope you can take a look at my car while we're here. The dealership keeps telling me nothing's wrong, but I know I hear a rattle. They stayed for 3 days, and by the end, Margaret was showing Sophie old photos of Elena as a child, and Charles was helping Ryan diagnose the mysterious rattle in his Mercedes. He's good for her, Ryan overheard Margaret tell Elena in the kitchen. I've never seen her this relaxed, this happy. He's good for both of us, Elena replied. They're my family now. After her parents left, Elena was quiet, thoughtful. What's on your mind? Ryan asked that evening, after Sophie went to bed. I was thinking about family, about how I spent so long believing that family was something you were born into, something defined by blood and obligation. But you and Sophie taught me that family is something you choose, something you build. Yeah, we did build this, didn't we? Elena smiled. We really did. May brought Sophie his 8th birthday, and she insisted on having a party at the aquarium. 15 kids running around, touching sea stars and shrieking at the jellyfish, while Ryan and Elena tried to maintain some semblance of order. This was a terrible idea, Ryan muttered, watching a group of boys race through the exhibits. This was the best idea, Elena countered, pointing to Sophie, who was explaining bioluminescence to anyone who would listen, her face glowing with joy. At the end of the party, as they packed up leftover cake and deflated balloons, Sophie hugged them both. Best birthday ever, she declared. Can we do this every year? We'll see, Ryan said, already dreading the logistics of next year's party. But watching Sophie run ahead with her friends, Dr. Tentacles tucked under her arm, Ryan realized these were the complications worth having. The chaos of birthday parties and school events, and a house full of people. The beautiful mess of a life fully lived instead of carefully controlled. That night, after everyone left and Sophie was asleep in her ocean blue room, Ryan found Elena on the back porch, staring at the small garden they'd started planting. Penny, for your thoughts, he said, sitting beside her. I was thinking about how different my life looks than I thought it would. A year ago, I was working 90-hour weeks, eating takeout alone, wondering if this was all there was. She leaned her head on his shoulder. And now I have you and Sophie, and a house with a garden, and birthday parties at the aquarium. It's so far from what I planned. Is that a bad thing? It's the best thing. The plan I had was empty. This life, the one we're building together, is full. She looked up at him. I want to make it official. Ryan's heart stuttered. Official how? Elena pulled a small box from her pocket, and Ryan's breath caught. But when she opened it, instead of a ring, there was a key. Move in with me, she says. Elena laughed at herself. We already live together. I'm doing this backward. She set the box aside and took his hands. Ryan Mercer, I love you. I love Sophie. I love the life we've built, and I want to build the rest of it together. Legally, permanently, completely. I want to marry you. Ryan stared at her, his mind struggling to catch up with his heart, which was already shouting yes. You're proposing to me, he said, slightly dazed. I am. Is that okay? I know traditionally the man asks, but we've never really been traditional, and I've waited long enough for the things I want. So yes, I'm proposing. Marry me. Please. Ryan pulled her into his arms, holding her tight enough that she squeaked in protest. Yes, he said into her hair. Yes, absolutely yes. Really? Did you think I'd say no? I was about 60% sure you'd say yes. The other 40%, I thought you might panic and say it's too soon or too fast, or Ryan kissed her, effectively shutting down the spiral of anxiety. When he pulled back, he was grinning. It's not too soon. It's not too fast. It's exactly right. He paused. But I have one condition. Elena's expression turned wary. What? We tell Sophie together, and we make sure she knows this means you're choosing both of us. That you're not just marrying me, you're choosing to be her family too. Ryan, I've been choosing her since the day we met at that park. This just makes it official. They told Sophie the next morning over pancakes, their Sunday tradition that had somehow survived all the changes and transitions. "We have some news," Elena started, and Sophie immediately looked suspicious. "What kind of news? The good kind or the grown-up kind where you say it's good but it's actually confusing?" Ryan laughed. "The good kind. Elena and I are getting married." Sophie's eyes went wide. "Married, married? Like wedding and everything?" "Yes, if that's okay with you." Sophie looked between them, her expression serious. "Does this mean Elena will be my mom?" The question hung in the air. Ryan and Elena had discussed this, knowing it might come up, but uncertain how to handle the complexity of Sophie's feelings about mothers. "I'd like to be someone you can count on like a mom," Elena said carefully. "Someone who's always here, who loves you and takes care of you and shows up to school concerts. But I also know you had a mom, and I'm not trying to replace her or pretend she didn't exist." "I don't remember her," Sophie said quietly. "And she left." "So, as far as I'm concerned, you're my mom. If you want to be." Elena's eyes filled with tears. "I want to be, so much." Sophie climbed onto Elena's lap, 8 years old, but still small enough to curl up and be held. "Then it's settled. You're my mom now, and we're a real family." "We were always a real family, sweetheart," Ryan said, his own throat tight. "This just makes it official." They planned a small wedding for late summer, something simple and intimate. Just close friends and family at a venue overlooking Puget Sound. Sophie insisted on being involved in every decision. "Can I pick the flowers?" she asked. "Of course." "Can Dr. Tentacles be in the wedding party?" "That might be pushing it." "Can I give a speech at the reception?" Ryan and Elena exchanged glances. "What would you say?" "I'd say that you both make me really happy and that I'm glad you found each other at that party, and that even though we're not a normal family, we're the best family." "Sold," Elena said, wiping her eyes. "You can give a speech." The months leading up to the wedding were a blur of planning and normalcy in equal measure. Ryan kept working at the garage, Elena continued running her company, and Sophie finished second grade with excellent marks and a science fair project about ocean acidification that won second place. Jessica helped Elena find a dress, something simple and elegant that made Ryan's breath catch when he saw it the day of the wedding. Marcus served as best man, making a speech about how he'd watched Ryan build walls for years, and Elena had somehow convinced him to build windows instead. "To Ryan and Elena," Marcus said, raising his glass, "may you continue choosing each other every day for the rest of your lives." But it was Sophie's speech that made everyone cry. She stood on a chair at the reception, clutching index cards she'd decorated with drawings of sea creatures, and spoke with the earnest confidence of an 8-year-old who knew exactly what she wanted to say. "When I first met Elena, I asked her if she was going to disappear, because that's what people did in my life. They disappeared. But Elena said she didn't disappear, and she was right. She showed up. Every Tuesday for dinner, every school concert, every time I needed someone to listen to my ocean facts, even when they were probably boring." "They're never boring," Elena called out, making the room laugh. "Elena showed up," Sophie continued, "and she kept showing up. And she taught me that family isn't just the people you're born to. It's the people who choose you and keep choosing you every single day. So today, when Elena married my dad, she didn't just become my stepmom. She became proof that sometimes people stay. And I'm really, really glad she stayed." There wasn't a dry eye in the room. Elena was crying so hard she couldn't speak, just pulled Sophie into a hug that lasted several minutes while the guests applauded. Ryan stood beside them, his new wife and his daughter, and felt the final piece of something click into place. The fear that had lived in his chest for 6 years, the certainty that good things didn't last, that people always left, that letting someone in was inviting inevitable pain, had finally completely dissolved. Because Elena had stayed, through his walls and his fear and his complications, through work stress and bad weather and the 1,000 small obstacles life threw at them. She'd stayed, and Sophie had learned to trust again, to open herself up to love without the certainty of abandonment shadowing every moment, to believe in the permanence of good things. That night, after the reception ended and Sophie fell asleep in the car on the way home, Ryan and Elena sat on their back porch under the stars. "We did it," Elena said, her head on his shoulder. "We did. I have something for you,"
a wedding present. She handed him a small envelope. Inside was a deed to the house they'd bought together. But instead of just Elena's name, or both their names, it listed all three: Ryan Mercer, Elena Ward Mercer, and Sophie Mercer. "You put her on the deed, Ryan said, his voice thick. "It's her home, too. I wanted her to know that legally, officially, permanently, this is her house, her family. She's not just living here, she belongs here." Ryan pulled Elena close, overwhelmed by the simple gesture that meant everything. "I love you so much." "I love you too. Both of you. My family." Inside, they could hear Sophie stirring, probably waking up confused about being home. Ryan stood to go check on her, but Elena caught his hand. "Hey," she said. "Thank you." "For what?" "For taking a chance on me. For letting me in when every instinct told you to protect yourself and Sophie. For choosing to build something instead of hiding from the possibility of pain. Thank you for being worth the risk." They went inside together to their daughter, their house, their life. The life they'd built not despite fear, but through it. The life that proved that the strongest families weren't formed from perfect circumstances or absent fear, but from people who chose each other and kept choosing each other every single day. Sophie was indeed awake, sitting on the stairs in her flower girl dress, holding Dr. Tentacles. "Are you guys coming to bed soon?" she asked, yawning. "Yeah, sweetheart, we're coming." "Good, because it's weird sleeping in the house alone. It's supposed to have all three of us." Ryan and Elena looked at each other and smiled. "You're right," Elena said. "It is supposed to have all three of us. That's what makes it home." They tucked Sophie back into bed, both of them this time, taking turns kissing her forehead and adjusting her blankets and making sure Dr. Tentacles was positioned correctly. "I'm glad you married my dad," Sophie said sleepily to Elena. "I'm glad I did too. And I'm glad you both chose me." "We'll keep choosing you," Ryan promised. "Every day. Forever." "That's a long time." "That's exactly the point." Sophie smiled and closed her eyes, already drifting off. Ryan and Elena stood in the doorway for a moment, watching her sleep in the ocean blue room in the house they'd bought together, surrounded by the life they'd built. "Happy?" Ryan asked quietly. "Happier than I knew was possible," Elena answered. They walked to their own room hand in hand, and Ryan thought about how far they'd come from that networking event where he'd almost left early. How one conversation about cars had led to coffee, then dinner, then falling in love, then building a family. How the simplest moments, Tuesday dinners, pancake breakfasts, aquarium trips, had woven themselves into something permanent and beautiful. Fear had told him to protect himself, to keep his walls high, to never risk the pain of loss. But love had whispered something different. Love had said that some risks were worth taking. Some people were worth trusting. Some families were worth building, even when, especially when, they looked nothing like what you'd planned. Ryan had spent 6 years living in the shadow of what might go wrong, but Elena had taught him to live in the light of what was going right. And Sophie had learned that same lesson, watching two adults choose love over fear, commitment over safety, hope over certainty. In the darkness of their bedroom, Elena curled against Ryan's side, her breathing already evening out into sleep. Tomorrow they'd wake up to the chaos of normal life, work and school and bills and all the beautiful mundane complications of family. But tonight, in this moment, everything was perfect. Not because there were no problems or fears or uncertainties, but because they'd chosen to face all of it together. Ryan closed his eyes, Elena's warmth beside him, Sophie safe down the hall, and let himself feel the truth he'd been afraid to believe. This was his life now. Not the carefully controlled existence he'd built around fear, but the messy, joyful, sometimes terrifying reality of loving people fully and letting himself be loved in return. The strongest families he'd learned weren't built from perfect plans or the absence of fear. They were built from people who chose to stay, who showed up on Tuesday evenings and Christmas mornings and ordinary Sundays, who counted during monkey bars and drove through snowstorms and said, "I love you," even when the words felt dangerous. They were built from moments like this one, quiet and simple and absolutely perfect. Ryan fell asleep surrounded by his family in the home they'd created together, and for the first time in 6 years, he wasn't afraid of what came next, because whatever came next, they'd face it together, and that was more than enough.